They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't remember. But I did. I remembered everything. The way my daughter whispered behind closed doors. The way my son watched me, as if waiting for me to slip. The way the mail started disappearing and appointments were suddenly being rescheduled without me knowing. At first, I thought it was just aging, that maybe I truly was losing track of things. A forgotten key. A missed phone call. A pot left on the stove too long. But then came the questions. Are you sure you already paid this, Mom? Didn't you say the same thing yesterday? Maybe we should talk about your safety just in case. Just in case what? That I'd forget who I was? Forget the home I built with my own two hands? Forget that I raised two children alone after their father walked out when they were barely in school? A number I hadn't forgotten. I had been distracted. I had been tired. But I wasn't losing my mind. I was being pushed into doubt, pushed into fear, and, I would soon learn, pushed out of my life. Hi, my name is Diane, and this is the story of how my own children tried to convince the world I was losing my mind so they could take everything I owned. But I didn't let them. I played their game. And then I flipped the board. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. It started subtly. My daughter Erica began visiting more often. She'd show up with groceries or flowers or sometimes just to check in. I was touched at first. She lived 30 minutes away and had a family of her own, so I figured she was just trying to reconnect. But she always seemed to be watching me. Not in the way a daughter admires her mother, but in the way someone studies a problem. She'd ask what day it was, or how long ago I'd bought certain things. Once, she asked me the names of my childhood pets, for fun. Then came David, my son. He's always been distant polite, but cold. Suddenly, he started calling 3 times a week. He'd ask about bills, the heater, whether I had trouble going up the stairs. At first, I thought they were just being caring, but the questions became more pointed. Then one morning, Erica came by with a clipboard. I made a little checklist, she said cheerfully, to help you remember daily tasks, just in case. I laughed it off. Erica, I'm not that old. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. No, of course not, Mom. It's just to be safe. That evening, I sat on the porch and watched the sunset through trembling hands. Something wasn't right. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being handled. Not helped handled. Like a patient. Like a problem. I began writing things down. Every conversation. Every visit. I dated every journal entry. Noted the time. Even the clothes they wore. I started recording voice memos on my phone. Just in case. Then came the breaking point. I was baking muffins for the church fundraiser when 2 men in suits knocked on my door. They were from the county's Adult Protective Services. We received a report, one of them said gently. Concerns about your memory, about your ability to care for yourself. My stomach dropped. Who reported me? I asked. They wouldn't say. But I already knew. They asked to come in. I let them. I wasn't afraid. I showed them my pantry stocked and labeled, my calendar meticulously updated, my medicine cabinet organized and current. I even offered them muffins. One of them chuckled and said, Honestly, ma'am, you're sharper than most of the people I know. They left within 20 minutes. But the damage was done. Someone had tried to flag me. Someone wanted a paper trail, a record, a case. That night, I called Erica. I didn't confront her. I played dumb. I asked about the fundraiser. I told her I was feeling forgetful lately. Her voice perked up. Really? Well, maybe we should schedule a doctor's visit, just to check things out. I agreed, but not for the reason she thought. I went. I did every test. Memory recall, cognitive ability, language, spatial awareness. I passed every single one with flying colors. My doctor even raised an eyebrow. Why did you want these tests again? I smiled. Just to be sure. I made 5 copies of the results. 1 for me, 1 for my doctor, and 3 I would use later when the time came to protect myself. Because I knew this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Their plan was more advanced than I had imagined. A week after the cognitive tests, I received a call from a woman who introduced herself as a family services coordinator from a private facility. She said Erica and David had scheduled a meeting to discuss long-term safety options for your well-being, Mrs. Diane. I paused for a moment, then asked calmly, "And did they tell you I agreed to this decision?" The woman hesitated. "Well, we were informed that consent was expected shortly." I ended the call with polite thanks, but inside me, a storm was forming. This wasn't a misunderstanding. My children weren't waiting for me to become weak. They were trying to convince the world that I already was, not for my benefit, for theirs. The next day, I walked into City Hall. I spoke to someone in the legal records department and requested copies of any official documents bearing my name. What I found chilled me. 2 weeks earlier, Erica had filed an informal request to obtain shared financial control, stating that I was in early stages of cognitive decline and unable to safely manage household responsibilities. Attached to the request was a form with my signature, only I had never signed it. That's when it all clicked. They weren't observing. They were orchestrating. They weren't concerned. They were preparing an exit strategy with me as the one being exited. I returned home, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window. I needed to think, not emotionally, strategically. First, I had to document everything. Every visit, every phone call, every unauthorized transaction. Then, I needed to understand the motive. The house, obviously, valued at over $700,000. But not just that, my savings accounts, the life insurance policies, even the engagement ring tucked away in a small safe behind a painting in the hallway. I had always trusted these things would be mine until the end of my days. And yet here I was fighting, not just for my independence, but for my very identity. In the days that followed, I played a role. I started forgetting things. I left milk out of the fridge. I asked Erica twice in 1 hour when she was coming back. I pretended I couldn't remember my PIN number. I was convincing. So convincing, in fact, that one morning David said gently, "We're worried about you, Mom. Maybe we should go ahead with that tour of the facility." I nodded with a dazed look. "Yes, maybe. I don't want to cause trouble." He smiled. What he didn't know was that I had already installed 2 micro cameras inside the house, one in the living room, one in the kitchen. Every word recorded, every expression captured. When Erica came over and handed me a healthcare readiness packet to sign, just in case of a medical emergency, I took the pen. While she distracted me with phrases about safety and peace of mind, I recorded everything. She never realized that the pen I was using was actually a hidden camera. Every movement, every line, every manipulative smile preserved. A week later, I sat down with an attorney who specialized in family fraud and elder protection. I laid out the entire situation, the forged documents, the deceptive tactics, the recordings. He listened in silence. Then he said, "Mrs. Hampton, you're sharper than anyone I've met this month, and you have an ironclad case. We prepared the paperwork, we built the strategy, but I knew this couldn't just be about winning legally. I needed the truth to shine where it hurt. I wanted the world to see what my children had become. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to let the evidence speak, and I was going to hit them so precisely, so quietly, that they wouldn't know the war was over until they'd already lost. They were sure they had already won. The way they moved, the way they spoke, the carefully rehearsed concern layered into every phrase, it all revealed how confidently they believed I was beneath them now. A fragile mother, a fading woman. But what they didn't count on was this: a woman who spent her life giving can be the most dangerous one when she stops. Attorney Prescott, The man who had taken on my case laid out the plan with surgical precision. We needed to document, compile, remain silent, and strike only when it mattered. Until then, I was to keep playing the role. Confused, vulnerable, cooperative, so I did. I pretended to misplace objects. I left the gas burner on just long enough for someone to notice and mention it, before calmly turning it off. I called David twice in one night, asking if I'd already taken my medication. Every move calculated. Every conversation recorded. And soon, just as we predicted, they began to feel justified. One morning, Erica walked right into my house using her copy of the Kino knock. No warning. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book, pretending not to mind the intrusion. "Mom," she said with her usual overly sweet tone, "maybe it's time we started managing your meds. You know, just so we can be sure everything's taken properly." I smiled gently and nodded. Then I asked, "Which way is the bathroom again?" She blinked. "Mom, it's down the hallway. Same place it's always been." "Oh, silly me," I replied. I could see the delight in her eyes. She thought she had me. That same day, I received official notice, a petition to appear in court. David and Erica had filed for partial guardianship, citing my declining memory and inability to manage daily tasks safely. Attached were affidavits, statements from so-called friends of the family, and most stunning of all, a journal they claimed I had written. It was filled with scattered, incoherent entries. Notes like, "What day is it?" or "Where did I put the keys again?" But I had never written those things. The handwriting was shaky, imprecise imitation of what someone thinks dementia looks like. A caricature of mental decline. They had forged it. Page after page of lies, carefully constructed to paint a version of me that didn't exist. I took the journal to a handwriting analyst. Within 2 days, he confirmed that it wasn't mine. The writing had been done by 2 separate people, neither of whom was me. One, according to him, was likely male, using their non-dominant hand. The other was clearly female, imitating an elderly person's script. I didn't even flinch when I saw the report. I expected as much. But now, I had proof. More importantly, I had motive. They weren't just trying to protect me, they were trying to erase me. Once the guardianship was granted, they would have access to my finances, the deed to the house, my insurance policies. They could sell, transfer, liquidate, and I'd be stuck in some facility, doped up, and forgotten. I knew how these places worked. I had been a nurse for 30 years. I'd seen women like me fade away not from illness, but from abandonment. Not this time. Not me. The court date was set. I told Prescott I was ready. But we still needed one more thing: public accountability. And that's when I started writing letters. Not to the court, not to my children, but to everyone they were trying to deceive. I wrote to my pastor. I wrote to my book club. I wrote to neighbors, to my doctor, to the woman who owns the bakery I've gone to every Saturday morning for the last 15 years. I told them, simply, that I was still me, that I had not forgotten who I was, that I had not declined, that I had not disappeared, and that if they had been told otherwise, they should ask themselves why. I didn't point fingers. I didn't beg for sympathy. I simply laid out the facts. I attached my cognitive test results, the forged journal pages, and a brief, signed statement from my attorney. And I ended every letter with the same line: "The truth doesn't tremble, it waits." I sent out 17 letters. Within days, I began to receive responses. Some came in envelopes, some in person. Quiet knocks on the door, side hugs. "I had no idea, Diane. I'm so sorry. They told me you'd been slipping. Whatever you need, I'm here." That was all I needed. Because now, my children weren't just trying to fool the court. They were going to have to fool everyone. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and cold, with clouds low enough to kiss the rooftops. I dressed slowly, deliberately, choosing a navy blue blazer and a pressed white blouse. I wanted to look like who I was, a woman in full command of herself, her memories, her history. When Erica arrived to pick me up, as she insisted, I played my role to perfection. I fumbled with the seatbelt, hesitated at the door, asked twice where we were going. She offered little smirks in response, subtle triumph flickering in her eyes. David was already at the courthouse when we arrived, standing with their attorney, a man with a polished smile and slicked back hair, the kind who speaks in tones of concern while holding knives behind his back. We didn't speak. We just exchanged tight nods. Inside the courtroom, I took my seat next to Mr. Prescott, who gave me a reassuring glance. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, entered and immediately began reviewing the file. David and Erica's attorney started first. He painted a picture of a loving son and daughter, burdened with worry, trying to protect their aging mother. He referenced concerning patterns, emotional instability, and evidence of cognitive decline. Then, he held up the forged journal and handed copies to the court. I watched him carefully. Every word was measured, every pause intentional. He was good. Too good. When it was Mr. Prescott's turn, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't pace. He simply stood and said, "Your Honor, what you're about to hear may sound like fiction, but I assure you, every detail is backed by evidence." He handed over the medical evaluation stamped and signed by 2 certified physicians. He submitted the video footage, Erica sliding forms in front of me, using manipulation disguised as care. He played an audio recording of David saying, "Once we have the guardianship, we'll be able to clean all this up." But the moment that broke the room was when Mr. Prescott pulled out the journal and said, "This piece of evidence was not written by the respondent. It was forged. We have forensic analysis confirming the handwriting doesn't match hers, and in fact shows signs of intentional imitation." The judge flipped through the pages, her face unreadable. Then she looked directly at me. "Mrs. Hampton," she said, "do you wish to speak?" I stood, slowly but with certainty, and walked to the center of the courtroom. My voice was steady. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. "Your Honor," I said, "my children have mistaken my kindness for weakness. They saw a woman who lives alone, who forgets a name here and there, and decided that was enough to erase her. But I am not gone. I am not broken. And I refuse to be buried while I am still breathing." There was silence, heavy, electric. Then I turned back to my seat, and the judge nodded. "We'll take a short recess before ruling." Outside the courtroom, Erica followed me to the hallway. "Why are you doing this?" she hissed. "Why are you turning people against us?" I turned to face her. "I'm not turning people against you, Erica. You did that yourself. I'm just finally speaking." David stood a few steps behind her, his jaw clenched, avoiding my eyes. He didn't say a word. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge gave her ruling without ceremony. Based on the evidence, this court finds no grounds for guardianship. Furthermore, due to documented attempts of manipulation and forgery, I am issuing a temporary restraining order preventing the petitioners from accessing the respondent's property or finances without consent. Erica gasped. David cursed under his breath. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Not in relief, but in readiness. Because this wasn't the end. Not yet. There would be fallout. There would be attempts to spin the story, to save face. But I no longer feared them. I no longer doubted myself. That night, I went home alone, poured myself a glass of wine, and lit a single candle on the windowsill. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and I sat in silence, not because I was hiding, but because I finally had nothing to fear. I had looked betrayal in the face and didn't blink. I had protected my name, my mind, my life. And now, it was time to decide what came next. The fallout from the hearing rippled through my life faster than I expected. Word got around quietly at first. Then, with momentum about the guardianship denial, the forged journal, the restraining order. People stopped me at the grocery store, at church, in the pharmacy parking lot. Some offered condolences like someone had died. Others congratulated me like I'd won a marathon. I didn't feel either. What I felt was focus. Because winning in court was defense. What came next had to be offense. Prescott urged me to restructure everything: title, banking, healthcare proxies, digital access. They failed once, he said. But that doesn't mean they're finished. Protect the perimeter. So I did. I moved my primary banking to a credit union in another county. I froze all automatic transfers and reissued every online password through an authenticator app neither of my children could guess. I changed the deed structure on the house, placing it inside a revocable living trust with very specific succession triggers. I remain trustee while living and cognitively competent. Successor trusteeship passes not to family, but to a 3-person panel: Prescott, my longtime pastor, and a financial fiduciary bound by state ethics law. If all 3 agree I am incapacitated, with medical certification, decisions move forward. If even one dissents, everything pauses. Prescott called it fail-safe autonomy. I called it insurance against love gone greedy. Meanwhile, Erica and David started damage control. I heard from Helen that Erica was telling people I'd been manipulated by outsiders. David told one of my old coworkers that the hearing was procedural and that I'd overreacted. I let them talk. Because the next move was mine, and it wasn't a rumor, it was documentation. I mailed a calm 2-page community update to the same list I'd written before: church, neighbors, social club, bakery, doctor, pharmacist. I thanked everyone for their support, confirmed the court's decision, and attached a 1-sheet titled, Protecting Your Future Documents, 8 Things I Learned the Hard Way. It wasn't spite. It was service. And it did something I hadn't fully planned. It turned me from a subject of gossip into a source of guidance. People started calling not to ask what happened to me, but how to protect themselves. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. Remember Adult Protective Services? The 2 men who'd come to my door months ago? I called them back. I invited them to speak at a workshop I hosted in my living room: 15 chairs, coffee urn, store-bought cookies. They said yes. We talked red flags, sudden involvement in finances, forged signatures, helpful checklists that become legal leverage, isolation framed as care. By the end of the meeting, 3 attendees scheduled medical baseline exams, 2 asked for attorney referrals, and 1 quietly admitted her grandson had taken over her debit card. That night, I wrote in my journal, my real one, information is the antidote to quiet theft. While I strengthened the legal walls, I also staged something more subtly diagnostic: trap. I invited Erica and David separately to help me organize paperwork on 2 different afternoons. Each session was recorded, with notice my state allows 1 party consent, and that party was me. I intentionally mislabeled a few envelopes. When Erica corrected me, she placed my medical file in a folder marked Long-Term Care, Transfer Authorization, and said, "We'll keep this ready in case we need to move you quickly." When David came, he photographed my insurance policies after saying, "You won't remember where these are anyway." Prescott nearly clapped when he watched the footage. "Pattern of intent," he said. Beautiful. I wasn't proud. I was sad. But sadness doesn't stop predators. Evidence does. The restraining order hearing for extension came up 30 days later. We presented the new footage. Erica's attorney objected: context, tone, stress, but the judge extended restrictions and added a condition: no entry to my property without written permission delivered 24 hours in advance. David's mask finally cracked. He muttered that I was ruining the family. I almost laughed. Families don't need secrecy to survive. Control does. After court, I drove myself, alone, happily, to the nursery and bought flats of lavender and foxglove. I planted them along the front walk that afternoon, knees in the dirt, sun on my neck, breathing free air. Each plant felt like a boundary staked in the soil. Mine, still mine, staying mine. That evening, I poured tea, opened my new locked filing cabinet, and reviewed Phase 2 of Prescott's plan. Public education series, statewide reporting initiative, and his idea, not the formation of a nonprofit advocacy network. I stared at the folder for a long time. I had never planned to become a banner for elder rights. I just wanted to keep my house. But maybe that's how movements start, with someone who refuses to surrender the one thing everyone else assumes they'll give up. I closed the folder, turned off the light, and whispered into the quiet kitchen, "I'm not done." And for the first time, I believed it all the way through. Spring arrived with a kind of poetic symmetry, as if the universe was reflecting back what I had spent the winter building: clarity, growth, and the stubborn return of life. The garden flourished. The sun lingered longer on my porch, and for the first time in months, I stopped bracing for someone else to take what was mine. I was sleeping through the night again. I was cooking full meals, playing music in the mornings, even reading novels instead of legal documents. But I didn't let comfort make me complacent. Prescott and I launched the first educational event under the name Second Voice, a name I chose because that's what I had needed most during those months of manipulation. A second voice, clear and firm, reminding me I wasn't crazy, I was being hunted. The launch event was modest: 25 people in a library meeting room, but the impact was immediate. Questions came fast, stories spilled out faster. A woman shared how her niece had sold her car for convenience without telling her. A man described his daughter-in-law slowly replacing his contacts and access codes until he couldn't reach his own bank. By the end of the evening, 5 attendees asked to help organize the next meeting. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a threshold. A line people were stepping across out of shame and into understanding. Meanwhile, Erica and David went quiet. I hadn't heard from either of them in weeks. The silence wasn't peace, it was calculation. I knew it. Prescott knew it. And Ron, our private investigator who had continued background monitoring, confirmed it. "David's been in meetings with a property group. They flagged your address before. Your son likely promised it. Erica has been meeting with a retirement placement consultant. They're still circling," he said. So I reinforced the trust. Prescott added a survivorship clause. Should anything happen to me under suspicious or unverified circumstances, the property would not pass to next of kin, but to the Second Voice Foundation with a court-appointed administrator. "You just created a deterrent," he said. "If they think there's no reward left, the game stops." And just like that, it did. 2 weeks passed, then 3, then 6. I began to believe they were truly gone. But then, one morning, a white envelope was slid under my front door. No stamp, no address, just my name written in thin black ink. Inside was a typed letter. No greeting, no signature. Just one sentence. "You've made things harder than they had to be." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done playing their version of the game. I reported the incident. I installed new motion-triggered cameras. I met with a cybersecurity firm to scrub my online exposure. I began consulting with a team that specialized in digital estate planning. I wasn't building walls out of fear. I was building them out of wisdom. Every step they had taken to strip me of control had instead forced me to become more powerful than I had ever imagined. More informed. More equipped. I was no longer just defending my life, I was fortifying it. That same week, I received a letter from a local university's gerontology department. One of their professors had attended the Second Voice event and wanted to collaborate on a curriculum for students entering elder care professions. "We don't teach how to spot manipulation," she wrote. "We teach how to treat symptoms. But maybe that's only half the work." I said yes. Not because I wanted to be anyone's curriculum, but because if a single caregiver learned how to protect someone like me before the damage was done, then all the letters, all the courtrooms, all the pain would serve a purpose. My life had become something bigger than self-preservation. It had become a firewall for others. And I wasn't about to stop now. I hosted a dinner for the board of Second Voice in my home. Just 6 of us. Candlelight, fresh bread, laughter. It felt strange to be surrounded by people who didn't want anything from me. No access, no signature, just connection. I looked around that table and realized something else had changed. I was no longer grieving the children I raised. I was honoring the woman they'd taught me to become. Not because of their betrayal, but in spite of it. I don't know exactly when the idea of reconciliation left my heart completely, but by summer it wasn't even a whisper in my chest. The part of me that once hoped Erica or David would come around, apologize, explain, even cry had gone quiet. In its place was something sharper. Not bitterness, but precision. I saw them for what they were, not what I wanted them to be. And when you stop hoping someone will change, you stop being vulnerable to their games. That was the gift I gave myself. Freedom without permission. Prescott noticed the shift in me before I even put it into words. "You're not protecting the past anymore," he said one afternoon. "You're protecting the future." That week, I received an unexpected call from a local podcast host. She ran a show on generational conflict and had heard about Second Voice through a neighbor. "Would you be open to sharing your story on air?" she asked. My first instinct was, no. I didn't want to become a cautionary tale. But then I thought about the silence women like me lived in, women who couldn't name what was happening to them until it was too late. So I said yes. I told the story, every painful part. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The host was stunned by the detail, but more than that, by the control I had regained. "How did you keep your sanity through all that?" she asked. And I told her the truth, by remembering I wasn't crazy, just targeted. After the episode aired, something extraordinary happened. My inbox filled with letters, hundreds, then thousands. Messages from people across the country, some elderly, some middle-aged, even some younger people worried about their own parents. They told me I had named their fear, that I had put language to a pattern they'd seen but didn't have the words for. Some cried in their messages. Others asked how to start a group like Second Voice in their towns. That week, I stopped being a victim permanently. I became a resource. And then came the most shocking letter of all, from my sister. We hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years. After a disagreement over my mother's care, we drifted into that silent estrangement that becomes normal with time. But her letter, 4 pages, handwritten, changed everything. She told me she'd been watching from a distance, unsure how to reach out. She'd followed the hearing online, heard the podcast, and wanted to say she was proud of me. "I didn't have the strength to fight like that when Mom got sick," she wrote. "You did what I couldn't. You fought for your dignity." I sat with that letter in my lap for an hour. Then I picked up the phone and called her. We talked for nearly 3 hours. We didn't resolve everything, but we reopened the door. And that, to me, was worth more than anything my children had tried to steal. One afternoon in late August, I saw Erica's car parked near my house. She wasn't on my property, just down the road. Watching, she didn't approach. I didn't wave. We simply stared. 2 people who shared DNA and once shared trust. Now strangers divided by truth. I watched her pull away slowly, and I felt nothing. No anger, no fear, just distance. A boundary she had drawn and I had enforced. I don't think she'll come back. Not because she learned her lesson, but because she finally understands she can't win here anymore. Not in court, not emotionally, not financially. The fortress I had built wasn't made of brick or password set, was made of clarity, of knowing who I was, what I deserved, and what I would never surrender again. That night, I sat on my porch, notebook in hand, and began sketching the framework for Second Voice chapters across the country. If they could try to strip me of everything, and I could survive, then maybe I could help others. Not just survive, but preempt the betrayal. I wasn't done. I was just getting started. It was a Thursday morning when the letter from David arrived, this time certified, stamped, and official looking. The envelope bore the seal of a high-end law firm I recognized from my research. Corporate, expensive, ruthless. I took a deep breath before opening it, already bracing myself for whatever tactic he'd chosen this time. Inside was a formal request to re-evaluate the status of Marlene Green's mental competence, citing concerning behavior and a decline in reasoning skills that may affect her capacity to manage assets and self-care. My hands didn't shake, not even a little, because I had seen this play before. This wasn't an escalation. It was desperation. They were trying again, but this time, I was armed to the teeth. I handed the letter to Prescott, who read it silently, then simply said, "Let's end this." What followed was 2 weeks of coordinated legal retaliation. Not emotional, not reactive, strategic. Prescott filed an official response backed by 2 separate medical evaluations, each signed by licensed geriatric psychiatrists who had already seen me in private sessions over the past few months. Both assessments declared me of sound mind, fully capable, and ironically demonstrating superior cognitive strategy for someone of her age group. We also included security camera footage, documentation of second voice activities, and statements from neighbors and professionals who had witnessed my independence firsthand. But the best part? A letter, notarized and signed by my sister, detailing what she had observed in the past, how Erica and David had attempted to isolate me, pressure me, and bypass my voice in decisions. The case collapsed before it even got off the ground. The judge refused to hear it, citing lack of credible foundation and potential abuse of legal process for personal financial gain. Prescott and I sat in silence after the court dismissed their motion. Not because we were surprised, but because it marked the first true public win. Not just a private victory, but an official stamp. I was not crazy. I was competent. And they were exposed. After that, there were no more letters. No more calls. Not even shadows outside my house. It was over. Not in some dramatic fireworks kind of way, but in the most powerful way possible. Silence that they knew better than to break again. That fall, I expanded Second Voice into 5 more states. I appointed regional coordinators, partnered with attorneys, and even developed a toolkit for social workers to identify subtle forms of coercion and manipulation. My days were busy, meaningful, and filled with people who saw value in wisdom, not weakness. I received a handwritten note from an 83-year-old woman in Michigan who said our hotline had saved her home from being sold without her knowledge. Another from a man in Arizona who used our materials to reverse a medical power of attorney granted under pressure. These weren't just anecdotes. They were proof that the battle I fought was never just mine. It was part of something much larger. And now, I was helping others fight theirs before they even began. One evening, I went through an old photo box pictures of David as a child, Erica in her school uniform, birthday cakes, hospital scrubs, and single mom Christmas trees. I didn't cry. I didn't shred them. I just sorted them quietly and put them in a labeled envelope. For history, not for grief. Because I had finally made peace with a cruel but necessary truth. Love, once weaponized, can't be returned to its original form. I will always love who I thought they were, but I no longer mourn who they chose to become. The night ended with me standing on my porch, a cup of chamomile tea in hand, the breeze soft against my face. The kind of peace I felt wasn't loud. It was earned, built brick by brick on the ruins they thought would break me. And I smiled, because I knew I'd turned betrayal into a foundation. And I wasn't done building. The months that followed felt like an entirely different life. Not just because the battle was behind me, but because I had stepped into a version of myself I never expected to meet this late in life. There's something about surviving betrayal from your own blood that forces a kind of clarity most people never experience. You stop performing. You stop apologizing. You stop trying to make others comfortable at your own expense. And most importantly, you start living for yourself. My days became full of purpose. Not the kind that fills calendars, but the kind that fills your chest. I spent my mornings walking through the neighborhood, nodding to the same people who once glanced away when rumors swirled. Now, they stopped to chat, asked questions. Some even offered to volunteer with second voice. I wasn't just a face in the neighborhood anymore. I was a presence, a story, a warning and a promise. Prescott helped me set up a workshop series at the local community center. We called it Power with Dignity. Each session covered things most people over 60 never get told: how to protect yourself legally, emotionally, and digitally. We taught women how to read contracts, how to ask the hard questions at the doctor's office, how to trust their gut when their own children start speaking and lawyers speak instead of love. The turnouts were bigger than we expected. Some drove in from towns 2 hours away. One woman in her 70s came with her daughter and said, "She made me come. Now I see why." And the daughter cried halfway through the workshop, not out of guilt but out of relief, because for once, she saw what her mother was up against and understood what love looked like when it was protective instead of possessive. I saw myself in every woman who sat in those plastic chairs clutching a notebook, too afraid to write the truth at first. But eventually, they did. They always did. Meanwhile, I'd begun slowly letting pieces of my personal life expand again. Not big leaps, but small, tender risks. I joined a local book club. I had tea with my sister twice a month. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since I was 26. It felt good to do things that had nothing to do with survival, nothing to do with anyone else. Just joy. Quiet, sacred joy. Erica and David remained ghosts. I heard from a neighbor that David had been passed over for a promotion and was selling lower-value listings now. Erica had moved in with a boyfriend 2 towns over. Neither of them attempted contact. And that was fine. Necessary, even. I had nothing left to say to them, and nothing left to give. There's a myth that families always come back together. That time heals everything. But some wounds aren't meant to be reopened. Some scars are warnings, not invitations. I used to think forgiveness was the final step in healing. Now, I understand it's just one of many options. And sometimes, the more powerful choice is simply to move on. Not with hate, but with detachment. I had reclaimed my name, my dignity, my voice. I didn't need anything else. And as fall gave way to winter, I found myself standing at the edge of something new. Not a cliff, a beginning. Winter arrived slowly, with crisp mornings and soft light pouring through my kitchen window. The same window where Caleb once handed me documents, disguised as love. But now, the house felt different. Not because anything had changed physically, my old furniture still creaked. The radiator still groaned, but because the weight of fear was gone. I moved freely through every room, not second-guessing myself, not wondering who might knock or what hidden motive might trail behind a smile. I was free. And freedom, I've learned, doesn't always come from a grand battle or dramatic courtroom win. Sometimes it comes quietly, like the moment you realize you've stopped checking the locks twice, or the moment you toss out an old mug that held more memory than meaning. I had spent my entire life giving care, giving trust, giving space for others to grow. And when my children tried to erase me, I didn't vanish. I rebuilt. I fought. I refused to be rewritten. That is the legacy I leave now. Not just through my story, but through every woman I reach, every voice I help strengthen, every person who realizes they are not powerless just because someone calls them old. My life is not over because I hit 70. If anything, it's sharper now, more vivid. I can tell who's genuine with a single glance. I know which words are cloaked in manipulation. And I've earned the right to say no without guilt. I no longer fantasize about reconciliation. I don't need it. I have peace, and more importantly, I have purpose. That's a gift far more valuable than the house they tried to steal. And if you've made it this far into my story, thank you. Thank you for listening, for bearing witness, for sitting with me through the hard parts and the healing. Let me know in the comments what part of my story hit you the hardest or where you're watching from. I read everyone, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it means this story might find someone who truly needs it right now.